Prosper Waukon here, along with his wife, his daughter, 3 grandchildren, and the great-grandchild. So, yes. They are living in Arizona, so it was a trek. Prosper he is the great-great-great-grandson of, I knew I was going to do this, Wakahaga, yes, I got it. Okay, I said it wrong this morning at the museum, so I apologized and asked, Prosper if it was anything bad that I said, but apparently not. So, I would like to give you a bit of a background on Prosper. He has 3 pages of things that he has done and awards he's had. I'll just read a little bit of it, and I'm sure you came to hear him and not me, but I think you need to understand that this is a special man up here. So, Prosper Waukon is an accomplished businessman, Indigenous leadership facilitator, Indian youth specialist, management, employee team development program and community coalition building, organizational strategist, human resources diversity consultant. He's held 17 directorships for 17 different organizations in the public and private sectors, the majority of which have been with Indian programs. He's served as an officer on 22 community, city, and state boards. He incorporated and was the present CEO of 4 nonprofit leadership and management, okay, I'll try that one again. He incorporated and was president CEO of 4 profit-making businesses and founding member of 5 nonprofits. Prosper has over 40 years of leadership and management experience, 28 years of those years managing, restructuring, and transforming Indian organizations and businesses into peak performing self-management teams. And that's only the first paragraph. So I think you get the idea. He has been a very active person, and he is going to tell us about the Waukon Decorah family legacy. Prosper, if you will.
Can you hear me? Okay. Am I speaking into the mic correctly? They told me at the most that they were going to have 30 people here. So, much to my surprise and delight, I'm glad to see this many show up. And to me and my family, that expresses a lot about your community and your interest in our Ho-Chungra people. And as my family was discussing among themselves, they're kind of still coming down from their cultural shock from the interest in our tribal people. It's something very unusual when we go about, because in the community, the non-native communities that we've been in, they already know who we are. They define us and they tell us who we are. And so they know everything about us, and they'll tell us how we are and how we should be as Native people. So we're kind of used to having that kind of reception. But I met different ones in the community since we've been here Thursday, and there's just a lot of significant knowledge that correlates with what I grew up with in our oral tradition. I'll start out by saying that my great-great-great-grandfather, Waukon Haga, known by your community as Waukon Decorah. And Waukon Haga was interpreted to mean walk on. And because he's associated with that Decorah line, he was Waukon Decorah. And so that's what he was known as. But he, over the years, and he passed it on, that was kind of his legacy, was he foresaw what was happening in this country to the Native people, and he anticipated a lot of things. And one of the things he always wanted to pass down was diplomacy. We've got to get ready. We're going to have to work with these people. We're going to become bridges. My line's going to be the bridge. And we're going to adapt to this culture. And maybe one day they'll listen to us and we can come together and come up with solutions to some of our biggest issues in the community. So that was kind of his format. Over the years, because of the breaking of the treaties throughout the United States, there was over 400 broken, and they were intentionally broken because the strategy was to get as much as you could through the treaties and then break the treaties. So he anticipated that, and his disillusionment came when he got so frustrated. He said he was going to breed the French part of him out of his bloodline. So he broke with the Decorah line and it became the Waukon line. And so he named his first son John Waukon. And so that's how we got that name. And then John Waukon had some children, and one of those was the hereditary leadership was passed on through that line. We were originally, when we were the Ho-Chungra and all together, we were a matriarch society. And with the assimilation, they call it the assimilation period, where our men started getting more power than the females, they kind of switched to the patriarch. And so the line kind of descended down through there. So John Waukon's son was Samuel Waukon, who was my grandfather's dad. His name was Walter Waukon. So that's kind of how that name changed. And then in 1887, that's when my grandfather was born. His father had to come up with English names because they couldn't pronounce our names. And so he was given, they said, you already got English first names, you just got to come up with an English last name. And he said, what's available? And they said, well, we got Smith, Jones, Richards, and he said, all right, I'll take Smith. So he became known as John Smith, and my grandfather became known as George Smith. So that name switched. And then in about 1986, my daughter, I told her telling her about our legacy, and she wanted to change the name back, and I said, well, that's what my grandfather always wanted, but I never gave it much thought. And so I told her we had to go to court to change the name and advertise, and so she was 8 years old. Her and I went to court to get our name changed, and so I had to go before the judge and give him my spiel on why we should change our name back. It was always our name. And then when she got up there, the judge was kind of toying with her and said, why do you want to change your name? Are you trying to hide something? And she was standing, no, Your Honor. She said, that's our family name, and it's for cultural reasons. And he said, okay. He said, well, that sounds good enough for me. Your name is changed back. And she left just beaming. Now, so we got away from the Smith name. And she was recently married. And she married someone named Smith. Can't get away from Smith. Anyway, that was part of our legacy, but that's something when I was reading and researching, and my wife and I did a lot of research, Jan, and we went through census data, the BIA records, and just a lot of data. The names, who you refer to as Glory in the morning, we don't have a word for glory. And so when we researched, we discovered that was a Christian adaptation. And the closest we come to it is the coming dawn. And so, the first son of hers and the Frenchman, Decora, was his name was called Ladle or Spoon Decora, who I'm sure you're familiar with because you have a lot of the records. I was impressed with how much records you have up here. And but his actual name wasn't that, the ladle. It was the white part of the face of a deer. And her second son was called White Breast Deer Chumokskaga. So they came from the Deer clan. Their names came from the Deer clan. So they had relatives in there. So that was our first clue on who all these different people were, because it was so confusing. The language that was misinterpreted kind of led you down a different path. And sometimes those names are repeated. So, good. So, I'd like to introduce my family members, and they'll give you their name, and they all carry a Huchungra name, and those names are sometimes referred to as spirit names. And so when we name our children, and they go to another clan for that naming, then they try to find the essence of that child. My two oldest grandchildren, Dakota and Ciara, were named by our elders in Winnebago, and I named the rest of them. So I'm going to start with their mother, Maggie, and then my name, is Prosper Waukon. My Indian name is Kisawe Wahiga, and it means calm spirit in the midst of storm. I didn't know the interpretation. I didn't seek the interpretation of it till I was 26 years old, because you have to aspire to that name. You got to live up to it. And I wasn't ready. I knew there was some requirements. So, but when I turned 26, I asked my grandmother. I said, "All right, what does my name mean?" And she said, "It means calm spirit in the midst of storm." It doesn't quite fit you yet, does it? She said.
Good evening. My name is Maggie Waukon Smith. My Ho-Chunk name is Wahukiwinga. I carry my great-grandmother's English name, Maggie, and so it was fitting that my father asked my Daga, which was my uncle who named me, that I get her Ho-Chunk name. And it means good good snow woman.
Good evening. My name is Ciara Waukon. My Hochangara name is Ite Maschawinga, which means she brings people together with the way she speaks, the way she talks.
Good evening. My name is Dakota Waukon, and my Hochangara name is Wakashank Hiparas Hikarege, and it means keeper of the sacred knowledge.
My name is Hannah Waukon Wolf, and my Ho-Chunk name is Wakanja Manape Wenga, which is Thunder Warrior Woman.
I gotta get up again because this is my daughter. Her name is Luna Waukon, and her Hochangara name is Moda Kutch Wipamakere Winga, which means Rainbow Desert Woman. And that's her name because her father is from the tribes in Arizona, and they're are the desert people. So she is a bridge between our two cultures and tribes together. Oh yeah, hold on, wait. Don't clap yet, they're jam still.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Janice Waukon. I'm Prosper's wife. My name is Hopi Winga, which means woman with a beautiful voice, which is cracking right now because I'm so happy and grateful to all of you.
So when I say the Waukon legacy, it comes from Waukon Decorah, Waukon Haga, and he set the stage for that continuing legacy. And as always, we think 7 generations ahead of our time, so I guess we're long-term thinkers, and we never think short-term. So he wanted us to continue and work whenever we could on bridging the understanding of our people to the non-Indian populations, whoever they may be. So, I asked this question when we were at the tiniest church in, I think, the world or Iowa, I'm not sure. But I said, what is it you'd like to know? And of course, there was a variety of things. So we talked about that when we got back to our place, and we tried to summarize them as best we could so we could try to cover everything. So, I think we can take about 3 to 4 of those questions and comprise them in this PowerPoint we're going to show. It was, who were the people that lived here before us? Who was Waukon Decorah? What was his, how did he get here? How did the Ho-Chungra people get here, And who are the Ho-Chungra people? Now, we probably don't have enough time, to say how we got here, but but I was thinking of our original land base covered. If you draw a straight line from Green Bay, Wisconsin to La Crosse, Wisconsin. Excuse me, I'm trying to, okay. And then you draw another straight line to northern Illinois, and then connect that line back to Green Bay. You got an idea of our original land base, and will show a little bit about that. We're going to go over the treaties first, and that'll show you how we got to neutral ground and what we have done since then. And then we're going to show you the Waukon lineage, you know, which you kind of know a lot about, but with some name changes in there. And then hopefully we can answer a couple more of those issues. So like I said, as Ho-Chungra people, that means people of the big speech, and you can take that several ways. We're either long speakers or we got loud voices, or we're great orators. So whatever way, and we kind of have an ongoing joke with our Wisconsin nations about who talks the longest, you know. So. Okay, this was the original land base before 1825. Okay, all of this area. And this was before Wisconsin or Iowa even became territories, so that's kind of where they were located. I had an interesting conversation with someone today, and they asked about that the Sioux were here before us, the Dakota people, and I said, well, we're supposed to be the big speech people, the original language of the Dakota people. I said, so that just means that we were always in this area. We had a war leader, his name was Little Priest. Well, they were in the stockades at Fort Thompson in Crow Creek, South Dakota. He took a lot of the young warriors and some of the young people, and he broke out of the stockades, and he escaped down the Missouri River in homemade boats and dugouts, and they landed in Omaha country, currently where we're at now. So that established the Winnebago Reservation. They later purchased it from the Omaha tribe, the northern portion of it. So that's where we reside now. The other Ho-Chunks always, they hid out in neutral territory, and they hid out in Wisconsin, and they were unable to get a reservation of their own because there had already been one established for them in Nebraska. So but they always came back to Wisconsin and up in this area because they liked the area. And then, so that was the kind of split with the two tribes that you have too. You have the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin and the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. So that's currently where how we got to where we're at today. So my so here's the shows the summary of the progression. All those dots over here, the Ho-Chunk people that snuck back to Wisconsin, they were helped by an attorney at the turn of the century to establish homesteads because they were legally homesteads, and they applied for their own reservation but were denied, but they did receive federal recognition. And so they're a thriving community right now, pushing each other. And there's a story about One-Eyed Decorah that he was ambushed, and he, as he was escaping, he was the only one left. He took 11 arrows in the back as he swam the Mississippi. And then when he was healed from that, he went to the U.S. government and said, "You guys have been chasing Black Hawk all these years and you're unable to capture him." And he said, "I'll do it for you, but I want to get paid for it." So he said he wanted 100 gold pieces and 20 horses that he selected. And so they agreed, and he went and he brought in Black Hawk. Waukon was, he captured Redbird and talked him into turning himself in during during that war. Then my daughter and grandchildren, as we were talking and they were coming down from their cultural shock, they asked, well, what is our ongoing purpose? Was it to be bridges, to tell the story that Indians are more than caricatures and created by Western thought, that they didn't understand us, so they had to understand us in their own way? And I said, yeah, for the most part. I said, but you know, it's difficult to transfer some concepts. And as I stated earlier, I said that the biggest difference is in how we think, you know. And I said the European legacy was transferred over into the United States. So there's a certain way they think, you know, and they're not able to comprehend a lot of the concepts we've already done as it relates to spirituality, I said, and how we can access those spiritual principles through our ceremonies and other ways. I said, and it's hard to explain that, and but the reason it's hard is we've never really had others listen to us, which is why it's such a gratifying experience for us to have this many here. And you know, I don't think I have to count people, but I think there's more than 30 here. So, but so that was refreshing. And then we've had other interesting discussions with some of the community people who are here too, you know, and where do you go from here, you know? And I used to say, you know, in the 70s, in the early 70s, there were at least 4 different authors of books, and their principles are still relevant today. And because they were all saying the same thing, they couldn't get together, and otherwise they would have realized you're saying the same thing. One was Vine DeLora Jr., and his most famous book was done in 1969, in which he listed all the Indian issues and the treaties and everything that happened throughout the U.S. and how you could fix those. And the name of that book was Custer Died for Your Sins. And the other author, Vine, then wrote another book that wasn't a bestseller like Custer Died for Your Sins was, and it was called The Metaphysics of Modern Existence. and people couldn't understand it because he dealt on the intellectual level, because he figured only the intellectuals would understand the metaphysics. So he tried to speak in that language. And, he always said if he had said it was entitled it differently, like ancient wisdom, that it probably would have sold more, but that wasn't his intention. So he ended up writing 20 more books, and another author around that same time was a Portuguese author from Brazil, and that was Paulo Ferreira. And he's was probably one of the best educators in the world, and he almost parallels Indian education, Indian education. And then the other one was Francois Ravel, who was from France, and he came over here, and he studied the United States, and he thought he still believed that they were the only country who could transform and progress, So if you really think about that. And the other one was Ernest Becker, The Denial of Death, So I really studied those concepts they had, and I said, I don't know. I said, these guys got to be Native American. They got to have some kind of Native American blood in them. I said, no, maybe it's Ho-Chunk blood they got in them, because they're brilliant, And some accuse me of a personal bias. So, But anyway, I still carry those books, and I reread them very quickly now, and I understand the concepts. And basically they're saying, if we can get over the past, and I was explaining this to an African American person, and I said, if Indian people who went through genocide, conquest, cultural invasion, and all of these things still can have hope and still carry their principles, surely the rest of the ones that are complaining can, because once we get past that and there's a redemption and you feel that, then we can start working together to come up with something better. And all it requires is us listening. If we could just shut up for a while, and listen, and we'd find that we do have those answers. And that's, again, the legacy of Waukon Haga. What he passed on, is never give up, no matter how hard it's going to be, And we went through the boarding school area. Both my grandparents were in boarding schools. And that's interesting. In spite of that, my grandfather utilized that education that they had there, even though he suffered the same way anyone else did in those boarding schools, and my grandmother did too. And so he was always bridging, Christianity, Native American Church, our Medicine Lodge, and he supported all of those, and he made that legacy speak louder. So, is my hour up before Q&As? One time I was speaking, my daughter's a TM teacher, and she was inspired by a person whose his mother-in-law is from this community. And I heard he recently moved back. And where is he? Travis?
He just stepped out.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was speaking at Fairfield in 2009, where our elders had an international conference. It was broadcast in 164 countries, and we were sharing our meditation wisdom along with their transcendental meditation. And there was their vice president. His name was Bobby, and all the elders were sitting on a kind of a stage like this. And he had it timed down to the minute, and he walked around with the card. You got 1 minute, you got 2 minutes. And he was getting really precarious, and we weren't intentionally ignoring him, but the people that were asking the questions, it was important that they answer it. So, and all of a sudden I seen him, he tore the sign up and just sat down and started listening. And then we spoke at the 2010 National Indian Education on Transcendental Meditation and how that could really help bridge the thinking, And there was an audience of, I don't know how many of our best Indian educated PhDs, masters, double PhDs. And so I said, all of you, I said, how many of you teach Indian education? And they all raised their hands, and I said, really? Then tell me what Indian education is, I said, and none of them could explain it to me. I said, are you just Indian teachers teaching Western education, which is fine, but just because you're Indian doesn't mean you're teaching Indian education. I said, the perception, I said, of Western thinking is that there's two separate worlds. One is spiritual or religious, and the other one is the physical world. And I said, to us, there is no such thing. They're both intertwined with each other. There's only one world we live in, and we live in it with everyone else. I said, so it's integrated, your spirituality is integrated into your culture, and it doesn't come from your culture, at least in our understanding of it. So, and so I said, so when you're talking about Indian education, there's a lot of discrepancies in that. And I said, but you got to start rethinking that too, So, and then don't want to put them on the spot, but I asked when we were at that tiny church, I asked the group there, I said, about your definition of community. What is your community? Tell me your community. And he was talking about what it involved here, the people, the different institutions, and all of that. And I didn't, I thanked him, but I said, our community seems to be much bigger. I said, because down here we got this earth and this grass, that's part of our community. And we've got these animals and these other plants, and we've got this air we breathe, and we've got these rivers, and they're all part of our community. That's our community. And there are our elders, because we learn from them, and we have to respect them, and we've got to listen to them. I said, that's just an example of the way we think, you know, the way we think. Does that make sense? So if you think about that, it's more than just the human species when we talk about community. You know, it's everything in it. You know, even inanimate objects. You know. Ciara is raising my great-granddaughter, and she's letting her explore. You know. And I remember we took her to a park in Tucson when she was 2, and she just ran and was hugging rocks and trees, and you know, and talking to them, you know, and everything. And I said, I hope you continue to give her that Indian education, you know, to get the essence of every living thing, you know, that's part of the community we live in. So it's really the solution to all these issues out here that we think are so major. The solutions are really simple, and that's what we keep saying. It's really a simple solution. If you think in the whole, you've got to identify the whole before you start breaking it down into segments. If you start working from the segments to trying to figure out where it fits in the whole, you're going to go down the rabbit hole. You know? You're going to be so confused. But if you have an understanding of how the whole functions, then you can see where each one of those parts fit. And that's native, that's Ochungra, that's the way they think, you know. Think of that whole. In Canada, they told me not, I made an error. I corrected them on the spelling of holistic. I said, you spell it with a W, you know. The correct spelling is H-O-L. And they corrected me. They said, no. They said, to us that the way you spell it correctly means holy to us, and we've had a bad experience with holy people. So he said, so we prefer it with the W, you know. Okay, what time is it? Is that an hour? Has anyone got any burning questions? Yes.
Did you visit Effigy Mounds?
We're going tomorrow. I have, but they haven't. This is their first trip to Decorah.
It's a sacred place.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, I want them to have that experience. Yeah. Yes.
A couple of questions. You mentioned that coming dawn was told to put that star name in the sun's name. Is that because they were half French, half white? Is that the reason for that? And then the second question I had was, I think the Decorah were they were here as leaders for Thunder Clan. Remember, the Thunder Clan carried on.
Yes and yes. No, we have 14 clans. We got 4 sky clans. And there's a little bit of difference we were talking about in the Ho-Chungra in Wisconsin and Ho-Chungra in Nebraska. And we have 4 sky clans. They relate to the powers of the sky people. Your highest ranking clan, which picked the leadership for the other clans in the tribe, was the Thunder Clan. Now that Thunder Clan is broken down into 4 subclans. The highest one is the Thunderbird Clan, which were Waukon was a Thunderbird Clan. And so we're Thunderbird Clan members. The next one was the Stormbird, and then the Invisible Thunderbird, and then the Lightning Clan. Now each of those 12 clans have 4 subclans. So that's 48 subclans plus your 12 clans. And their leadership was selected by the Thunderbird Clan. And it wasn't like they appointed leaders, but they would go out and they'd tell the other clans, here's what you look for in our future leaders. Look at some unusual ability of these kids. Notice it and then nurture it and then give them to the elders to nurture those gifts. Because one day we're going to call upon them that they might have to lead us in times of crisis. So that's how our leadership, and that was our function of the Thunderbird Clan. And then we had 8 Earth clans, that had various duties. Everyone had various duties. We were only tasked to learn about our own clan and the 4 subclans. So we had to be experts in those clan functions, how it was. So does that answer your?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Yesterday you held a tobacco offering, tobacco ceremony. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that and how you give thanks to the 4 cardinal directions and so on?
There's tobacco. You got to remember when they classified the Ho-Chunk as one of the war bands. But again, the concept of war is very different than what you think of it is today. There wasn't any mass killings, or any genocidal practices. A big battle was maybe 3 to 7 Indian men getting killed, and that number was held down because the highest honor in a battle was the highest coup count. They call it counting coup. Now, listen to that term, counting coup. The highest coup count was to ride up to the enemy and slap them in the face with your stick and get away. The lowest looked upon coup count is if you had to kill that person. So, and our concept of warrior related more to warrior spirit because a lot of our women were warriors. Remember, we come from matriarch. Most tribes in the U.S., if they trace it far enough, it's a matriarch society. And so they selected people they would appoint to the councils. So now, because it was a war tribe, what that means is they had huge hunting areas that they had to protect and respect different boundaries. And there was, otherwise, if you're a smaller band, and a lot of it went down in the Southwest, is they could catch you and enslave you. They didn't keep slaves, but they sold them to white Southern farmers, so they would sell them, you know. So that tobacco was given to them, they believe, as a their creation. Our creation story says that all these animals and insects and the flying people, the sky people, all of these were created before the human species. And so by the time it got around to the human species, the great mystery had run out of gifts to give them. So, because they were the weakest of all his creations, because they had to wear clothes, they didn't have a second skin, they didn't have fur. They couldn't, survive by themselves. So he gave them that tobacco, and he said, if you do this tobacco, the other world and the spiritual, the spirits of that world will grant you what you want, because they like that sweet smell. So that was the tobacco. Every tribe has a different kind of tobacco and myth about their creation. But as far as the directions we pray to are 7 directions, as very similar to Dakota people. It's a circle with a cross in the middle representing 4 directions, the 4 cardinal points. And then you have the earth as your 5th, the sky as your 6th. And anyone got an idea where the 7th point would be? Yourself. It always comes back to you in present, because everything revolves around that. So you're always living in present time, and so you have access to all these sources, and so you pray that way. When you think short and long term, we're always thinking 7 generations ahead. What we do now is going to affect us 7 generations. So we're kind of not short-term planners, we're long-term planners. So, short-term, you might get something now, but long-term, you'll probably lose something. So, does that answer that? Any other questions?
Yes, another question. You've mentioned more than once the difference between the Indian way of thinking and the other way of thinking. Is there anything about the other way of thinking that you've found useful or admirable, or think, oh, that's a good idea?
Yes, that's why we encourage I'm going to sit on here, I'm not, we were always encouraged by our elders to get a Western education, because in order to understand, you have to see what their values are. You got to see what they how they function and everything. So they say, get that. I remember being in a ceremony, and these young people were going off to college, 2 young men, and they were telling them, get that education. And they said, but don't become so educated that you don't know nothing. And then I remember a young militant man, very militant, very rageful at what happened here, and rageful at Indian people and white people. Indian people because they didn't fight back enough. And I remember that young person telling the elders, you gotta do it this way. I've been to the cities, I've been around, I know what I'm talking about, you gotta fight back, we can't take this. And the elders looking at him, and one of the elders stands up and he says, I'm really proud of our young people today. They've got this education. They've been in this white world, they've been in this urban area, and now they can even come back and tell us how we should be living. He said, but one day they're going to realize they know nothing, and then they're going to know something. And I don't have to tell you who that young man was. So those elders kept us in line, and they kept us close to those teachings, because those teachings are universal. I learned about business and finance, and I worked for one of the largest defense contractors, and I controlled massive military budgets. And I was only going to stay there 2 years to learn business. I ended up staying there 5 because they kept promoting me and then saying, you're going to be our first vice president of one of these divisions. And I can see how attractive that was. That was an education in itself, because I was attracted to that, And but finally I had to break loose, and I started my own business. And I ended up having 480 employees that were so unusual. They weren't the cream of the crop. Half of them were federal, the other half were state parolees. And the others were ex-gang members, or gang members just coming out. But you know what? They told me I was stupid because there's not a workforce in those areas. And that was just a challenge to me, and I showed they could be competitive if you gave them the right environment, and you made that company theirs. And so we won a lot of contracts, in whole different areas. We even competed, I don't know, I'm probably dating my age here, but how many of you remember Suzanne Summers? Okay. We competed against her Thigh Master and won. Ours was called the Thigh Toner. And hers had 3 Fulcrum parts and ours had 28 mechanical parts. So, and talk about entrepreneurs, those people on the line, I depended on their ideas and to tell me, and they'd come up with, these amazing ideas, and we just run with it. I had 26 highly trained ex-defense engineers in all areas, and they asked me, how do you pay for them? And I said, they're how much do you pay them? And I said, $10 an hour. And they said, what? I said, these are retired people. They got their benefit. But they wanted to be able to implement their own ideas, and they're just happy to be working in this environment and creating things. So you're always thinking, about different things like that, So there's always, I had untraditional hiring methods. Well, you had to have. I didn't use a resume. I say, go work on that line. There's a line of 10 of them. They decide if they're going to hire you. But I said, I give them a bonus for production quotas. I give them a bonus at the end of their shift. And I said, if you slow them down, they're not going to hire you, or they can kick you off. So they self-monitored, they manage themselves, And so they function like that, And I say, then I'll start doing your application and all the legal stuff, So, yeah. Yes.
Explain how, yell it? You're almost up.
Oh, did I answer your question?
Thank you.
Explain how you don't have aunts and uncles.
Okay. Okay. Ciara has Luna. Okay. Luna's mothers are Ciara's sisters. Ciara's brother is the uncle, the Degas. Now, those mothers and those Degas are responsible for Luna's upbringing and discipline. And so they're the only ones that can do it. Ciara has to keep her mouth shut when they're disciplining her daughter. Because we knew long ago that parents can't be objective about their own kids. So, neither can grandparents because we spoil them. So they have to take that role. Okay, now imagine you have 4 sisters. They're the mothers of your children. But the father, his brothers are the fathers of them. So you always have a stream of fathers and mothers. We don't acknowledge like cousins, it's brother, sister. And then as you go down, it's little uncle, little Dega, And so there is no orphans in our society. There's always someone there to replace them. I said my grandparents raised me when I was 2 weeks old. My dad was in prison. My mother was moving to Minnesota. And I grew up with lots of mothers and lots of fathers. So to me, I didn't miss them, because there was always someone replacing. There's always someone there to take over for them. So, is that? Okay.
Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share about missing and murdered Indigenous women?
About what?
Missing and murdered Indigenous women.
What's that?
MMIW?
What is that?
It's like, what? Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna do it now?
Yeah.
Oh, God, okay. Like, what? I don't know. He's not on social media.
Yeah, he's not on social media, so he doesn't really
MMIW is a movement within the indigenous communities where we talk about how indigenous women and peoples in general are just, we are in the 90 percentile of unsolved missing and murdered cases. When our women go missing, a lot of times it goes under radar. We get told that like, oh, they probably just ran off, it just isn't really taken seriously until, bodies show up. Honestly, that's what it is, And in our communities, we go to far more funerals than we ever go to weddings. I've been to maybe 3 weddings in my life, but I cannot count the funerals I've been to. The most prominent one I remember from my youngest years was, it was one of my sisters. She was 16 years old and she got found in the snow, and these kind of things constantly go under the rug and they're not just brought to light. Even recently there was a really prominent actor that he's been graduating from Haskell, the Indian University, and he's in a spin-off of that Yellowstone show, and he went missing. And when he went missing, there was just a lot of stuff being thrown out there, he was an abuser, this and that, he probably was on the run. And then maybe a week later, they found his body and his braids were cut off. He had real long hair and they cut his braids off and he was found.
Same place they found his sister.
The same place that they found his sister, actually, like how soon prior? But, so, and then it just kind of,
with no foul play ruled.
and it was ruled no foul play, that part too, I didn't know that part, but and it was ruled no foul play. But, for Native people, our hair, it's a really big part of, it's like really sacred. It's kind of what keeps us grounded and rooted into the physical world, and so, I don't know, that's just, yeah, it's just really, it's just very detrimental, and it was really heartbreaking, for the entire community. And every time things like this come out, it's devastating. Even, I'm on Facebook, and every other day, people from my reservation or other reservations are posting missing 15-year-old girls last seen, and they're talking about how police departments aren't doing anything about it. They're not trying to help, and it's a really big problem that I feel like needs to be more mainstreamed, because then we have like a few years ago, the band, Gabby Petito, it's devastating when these things happen, but then there's so much media and limelight on, specific people, whereas, there's just, other people are being shoved under the rug. And yeah, I think I've learned that, well, in our communities, MMIW is a very prominent, we talk about it a lot, it's very known. When I talk about it outside of the community, though, it's not well known, and it's, really sad. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that, but yeah.
You said you live in Arizona now, Prosper?
Yes.
Yeah, and I just wondered, do you mingle at all with the Southwest Indian tribes, the Navajo or the Diné or whatever, or the... Yes.
There's 22 different tribes in the state of Arizona, and they own 1/3 of the state.
Right, the Navajo, yeah.
Yeah, well, you got Navajo, the second largest community is the Autumn people, who are known as the Pima people. There's 5 tribes. That's where Luna's father was from. And I retired from Gila River, which is an Autumn reservation next to Phoenix. They're probably the more assimilated, and they have a lot more resources, and they're known as the Akma Autumn. They're called the river people. And then Luna's people they're known as, they used to call them papago, which in Spanish means bean eaters. Well, their real name was Tohono O'odham, which means the desert people. So, and then the Apache nations, most of them are located down there. But
What about
there's
the Hopi too? The Hopi?
the Hopi, yep, 22 tribes. Yep. Yeah, Pasquayaki. Yeah.
Do you find that you have some similarities with them and how you look at life? And
Oh yeah, there's there's some crossover in our traditional ways, but most of the thinking is the same. You got to remember, a lot of tribes have assimilated more and more into mainstream, you know, and so the O'odham people, the desert people, they have such a huge land base, and some of them still don't speak English, you know, like the Navajo, you know, they don't. So,
thank you.
yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm going to just be a witness here. You earlier spoke about your community extending beyond people to the land itself, the animals.
Could you speak up?
I said you earlier spoke about your community extending beyond people to the land and so on.
Right, right.
And the solutions to our world problems right now being really simple. And Waukon Decora's speeches during treaty sessions aren't widely available for people to read, but I've spent a lot of time reading them, and I would say you're echoing things he was trying to communicate at that time. And I've told many people over the years that of all the people I've read from this area, no one is more articulate or more wise than he was. So thank you for reminding us who he was and what his message was. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. And not only was this an unexpected crowd, there's I see not too many have left, so that says something. So. Thank you.